Hello friends. I believe that real estate in Montenegro is an excellent asset that everyone who can afford it should acquire. Of course, real estate is not the most profitable asset. For example, the American stock market grows by an average of 80% annually, which gives you the opportunity to earn a bit more than by investing in real estate. Yes, investing in your business brings in more money than the relatively passive income from real estate. But real estate, on the other hand, allows you to earn steadily with zero risk, which is impossible on the stock market or when starting your own business. So today, let's talk about how much you can earn from real estate. In my explanation, I will rely on a specific example of renting out my own property. I'll share all the numbers and show exactly how much I earned from this particular property. So you'll see how much you could potentially earn if you bought another property of similar value and quality. We'll be working with a concrete example covering the period from late August 2022 to late August 2023. The first thing to consider is whether to rent out the property short term or for a long period. Obviously, renting out property for the long term is easier. You move tenants in and then just collect your money to your bank account every month. You don't have to do anything. You might not even need to visit the apartment at all. Well, maybe drop by once a year to see how things are going. On the downside, one of the main drawbacks is that with permanent residence, the wear and tear on the furniture is higher, since people are living in the apartment all the time, not just occasionally like with short-term rentals. Whereas with short-term rentals, you'll have to put in a bit more work. But honestly, to be frank, there really isn't that much to do. But judge for yourself. In tourist apartments, it's usually not the property owners who do the cleaning, but hire cleaners. Of course, if you want, you can do it yourself, but hardly anyone actually does that. So what do you need to do? You just need to keep in touch with the tourists, arrange for the cleaner to clean the apartment, then meet the tourists and register them at the information center. And at the end of their stay, you see them off. Basically, there isn't that much work. But it really limits your mobility. That's the downside of short-term rentals. It really restricts your mobility. You can feel it even with just one apartment. If you have 2, 3 or more apartments for rent, then of course you feel it even more. So there's always someone arriving or leaving and you have to adjust to that. Maybe you want to go somewhere, but you have tourists coming or going, and that's just a bit of a hassle. So there isn't a lot of work, but the downside is that your mobility is limited. Short-term rentals bring in more money than annual leases. So let's take a look at how much you can actually earn from short-term rentals. Again, using a specific example of a particular property. We have one apartment available for rent. We bought it a few years ago. At that time, it cost 80,000 euros. Now, its value is significantly higher because in Montenegro, just like in all of Europe, property prices have gone up. Nevertheless, when calculating the payback period, I will base it on the purchase price. Plus, we spent another 9,000 euros furnishing this apartment. So the total expenses for the purchase came to 89,000 euros. Over the year, that is from the end of August 2022 to the end of August 2023, tourists generated revenue of 11,278 euros. This is by no means profit. This is only revenue. We subtract various expenses from this. Profit tax is 1,184 euros. Building maintenance, annual tax, payment for the cleaning lady, depreciation, the management company's commission, utilities. So the total expenses are 5,315 euros. You can see all of this in the screenshot on the screen. Knowing the revenue and expenses, and of course knowing the property value, you can calculate the payback period. Over the year, the net profit amounted to 5,963 euros. That means that the investment in this particular apartment can be recouped in 15 years. In my opinion, that's not such a bad payback period. At the same time, it's important to keep in mind that the revenue will gradually increase since the property is gaining traction, accumulating reviews on Booking.com, and will be booked a bit more often. You might say that my calculations are incorrect. One should take into account not the purchase price of the property, but its current value. I would answer that perhaps you are right, but I also based the rental price in last year's rates. I'm sure that in the current season, due to European inflation, the daily rental price will already be higher than it was before. Inflation is raging across all of Europe. Prices are rising for literally everything, including property rentals. But how do you get clients? Again, specifically when it comes to vacation rentals, that is short-term rentals, the lion's share of bookings comes from Booking.com. So even though some people might not want to give them 15%, you simply can't do without their mediation. Still, don't just sit around doing nothing, actively promote your property yourself. You will find a certain number of clients without booking. Many people think that the season in Montenegro lasts only 3 months. That's not true. Tourists come all year round, and in fact, during the 7 months of the off season, just as many come as during the 5 months of the high season. But prices are significantly lower outside the season. That's why, of course, revenue during the season is very important. Regarding occupancy, I can say the following. July and August. The occupancy rate for good apartments and my apartments are good is close to 100%. May and September, there are reservations, but fewer than during the peak season. The rest of the year, there are reservations, but they are irregular. Sometimes in a given month, there might not be anyone staying at all, while another month could be fully booked. It's difficult to predict occupancy outside of the peak season, but I can say for sure that if you don't just sit around and actually do something, you'll have clients even in the off season. As for the rental period, that's up to each person to decide. We rent it out for a minimum of 1 week. If you rent out for any period starting from a single day, you could probably achieve higher occupancy and more bookings for your apartments. But that leads to more wear and tear on the apartments. We decided that rentals for less than a week simply weren't of interest to us. But what's interesting to you, decide for yourself. Advice: buy good, high quality real estate. Yes, you can buy something cheap, but that cheap property, meaning low quality, will also bring in significantly less money. It's better to have one high quality property that rents out well and at good prices than 2 cheap shacks that will cause twice as much trouble, while the income will basically be the same. Should you buy real estate in Montenegro? If you have the money, definitely yes, and that's regardless of the purpose for which you're buying it. For rental purposes, as I just mentioned, the payback period for real estate is about 15 to 16 years. For personal residence, as I also just said, with long-term rental, this particular apartment would pay for itself in 18 years. So accordingly, if you buy an apartment to live in Montenegro permanently, over 18 years you would end up paying the cost of the apartment in rent. Therefore, it's also more advantageous to buy it. For regular summer vacations, renting a good 2-room apartment for the whole summer will cost around 8 to 10,000 euros, or maybe even more. I stopped renting to tourists and I'm not keeping track of prices now, but I think that this year prices will go up. So if you come every summer for the whole season, you'll pay off the apartment in about 10 years. Therefore, once again, it's more advantageous to buy it than to rent every year and end up spending a lot of money. Friends, my name is Dimitri. You can contact me with questions about starting a company, about obtaining a residence permit, or about accounting services. All my contact information is in the description of this video. Goodbye, everyone.